Imagine for a moment that everything around you, your surroundings, the people you interact with, the very thoughts you have, could all be a highly advanced simulation created by a civilization far beyond our own. This idea is known as the simulation hypothesis, and it's one of the most fascinating and mind-bending concepts to come out of philosophy and science fiction in recent years. The concept was proposed by philosopher Nick Bostrom, who presented a chilling yet intriguing possibility. We might be living in a simulation, a reality indistinguishable from what we consider real. But how does this hypothesis work, and why is it so significant? Bostrom argued that there are three potential scenarios that could explain our situation. Let's dive into each one. The first scenario is a bleak one. Advanced civilizations destroy themselves before ever achieving the technology needed to create these simulations. It's a possibility that we may never reach a point in our development where creating a simulated world is even feasible, either due to self-destruction or other existential risks. The second scenario is more optimistic. Advanced civilizations develop the technology, but simply have no interest in creating simulations. Maybe they have other pursuits or just see no value in constructing artificial realities. It's an intriguing idea, but if true, it leaves us off the hook from the simulation question. Now, the third and most provocative scenario suggests that advanced civilizations do create vast numbers of simulations, and that we are almost certainly living in one of them. If this is the case, then it would mean that there are potentially billions of simulated realities in existence. So statistically, it becomes more likely that we are part of one of those simulations than that we are living in what we consider to be base reality. This concept raises a staggering implication. If we are in a simulation, everything we perceive as real might be a carefully crafted illusion, designed by entities or civilizations far beyond our comprehension. And with that mind-bending thought, we begin to see just how deep the simulation rabbit hole goes. As we move further into the 21st century, the idea of a technological singularity, a point in time where technological progress accelerates beyond our control or comprehension, becomes more plausible. At this singularity, innovation could occur so rapidly that predicting the future becomes impossible. But what would such an event look like? And how does it connect to the possibility of simulated realities? One key factor that brings us closer to the singularity is exponential growth in computing power. For decades, we've seen a trend known as Moore's Law, which states that computing power doubles approximately every 2 years. This seemingly consistent growth has led to computers becoming increasingly powerful, and with each leap, the potential for creating highly detailed and complex simulations grows. Now imagine a future where simulations are so sophisticated that they mimic every detail of human experience, down to the finest sensory perceptions. The more powerful computers become, the more complex these simulations can be. But we're not just talking about traditional computing power. There's something even more groundbreaking on the horizon: quantum computing. Quantum computing is set to take computational capacity to a whole new level. Unlike traditional computers that use bits to process information as zeros or ones, quantum computers use quantum bits, or qubits, which can exist in multiple states at once. This could revolutionize how we process data, enabling simulations that are orders of magnitude more complex and realistic than anything we've seen before. In theory, a quantum computer could simulate an entire universe with immense detail, potentially bringing us even closer to creating a reality indistinguishable from our own. But that's not all. We also have artificial intelligence and machine learning making rapid strides. AI is already capable of simulating complex interactions like human speech, behavior, and decision-making. We're starting to see virtual worlds where AI-controlled characters seem incredibly lifelike, reacting and adapting in ways that mirror real people. As AI continues to improve, simulations could evolve to create virtual societies, complete with their own economies, personalities, and dynamics. When you combine the power of exponential computing growth, quantum capabilities, and AI-driven complexity, it becomes clear. An advanced civilization could, in theory, create simulations so intricate and convincing that those within them would have no way of distinguishing them from real life. This doesn't just open up the door to simulation theory, it could one day make it possible to create simulated worlds that feel completely real. So as we look ahead, it's not too far-fetched to consider that we may one day create simulations that are not just realistic, but indistinguishable from the world we live in now. We're living in an age where technology is already beginning to blur the lines between the real and the virtual. One of the most exciting advancements in this area is virtual reality, or VR. Over the past decade, VR has evolved from a novelty to a mainstream technology, allowing users to experience immersive, simulated environments that feel strikingly lifelike. Think about it. Today, we can put on a VR headset and find ourselves transported to a virtual world. Whether it's exploring a fantastical landscape or engaging in a realistic simulation of a distant city, VR has come a long way in creating environments that feel genuine. This immersive quality is at the heart of what makes VR so exciting, and it's a stepping stone to even more sophisticated simulations in the future. But what's truly fascinating is how our brains are uniquely susceptible to sensory manipulation. In a VR environment, our senses, sight, sound, and even touch, are tricked into believing that what we're experiencing is real. The brain processes these virtual sensations as though they were happening in the physical world, making the experience incredibly convincing. Whether it's the feeling of walking through a virtual forest or the sound of rain falling around you, our brains accept these stimuli as real, despite knowing they aren't. Now consider what's possible right now in the world of VR. The technology we have today allows us to simulate sight, sound, and even motion to create immersive experiences. But the future potential of VR is even more exciting. Imagine a world where simulations don't just engage your vision and hearing, but also simulate your sense of touch, smell, and taste with absolute precision. Picture entering a virtual world where you can interact with objects that feel just like the ones in the real world, where every texture, temperature, and weight is replicated down to the finest detail. If we think about it, the immersive VR of today is just the tip of the iceberg. Consider this thought experiment. If current technology can already create convincingly lifelike scenarios for the senses of sight and sound, what will happen centuries from now? What happens when we can simulate all the senses in a way so refined that you won't be able to distinguish the virtual world from the one you were born into? It's not just about creating fun or engaging experiences anymore. It could be about crafting entire realities that feel as real as the one you wake up in every morning. So, when we think about virtual reality and the power of simulations today, it's not hard to imagine that one day, the line between virtual and real may completely vanish. The future of simulation technology could take us to a point where we might find ourselves living in simulations that are indistinguishable from life itself. When we look at the world around us, we often see more than just objects and phenomena. We see patterns. From the spirals of a sunflower to the way galaxies form and rotate, the universe is full of mathematical structures that seem to govern the natural world. These aren't just random occurrences. They follow precise laws and equations, often revealing a deeper, more ordered reality. One of the most famous examples of this is the Fibonacci sequence, a mathematical pattern that appears throughout nature, from the arrangement of leaves on a stem to the spiral shells of mollusks. But the presence of such recurring patterns doesn't stop at nature's beauty. It extends to the fundamental laws of physics as well. In quantum mechanics and general relativity, the universe operates according to highly complex mathematical equations that describe everything from subatomic particles to the fabric of space and time itself. The very structure of reality seems to be built on mathematical rules. Now here's where simulation theory comes into play. Some proponents of this theory argue that these mathematical laws could actually be code, the underlying instructions that govern our simulated reality. Just like how a video game world operates on lines of code to dictate the behavior of objects and characters, some believe that the universe might be running on an equivalent system of mathematical rules. This idea ties into a concept known as digital physics. Some physicists have proposed that the universe might not be continuous, but instead quantized, meaning it operates like a digital system where space, time, and even energy exist in discrete units, much like how a digital image is made up of tiny pixels. If the universe is quantized in this way, it would be similar to a simulation, where every bit of information is broken down into individual data points or chunks. If we think of the universe as being made up of these fundamental units, we can't help but ask, could these units be the building blocks of a computational reality? Could our entire existence, from the smallest particles to the largest galaxies, be part of a massive digital system running on an intricate set of codes? If this is true, it would provide a compelling argument for the idea that we are living in a simulation, a reality that's not continuous, but instead made up of discrete data points, governed by a set of rules and equations. The mathematical patterns we observe in nature might not just be coincidences. They could be evidence that our world is computationally generated. And with that, the more we study the universe's mathematical structures, the more we begin to see that reality itself may not be as solid and unchanging as it seems, but rather something much more malleable and potentially something designed. When we delve into the bizarre world of quantum physics, we encounter phenomena that defy our traditional understanding of reality. One of the most puzzling aspects is the concept of quantum indeterminacy. At the quantum level, particles, like electrons or photons, don't have definite properties until they are measured or observed. Before observation, they exist in a state of uncertainty, behaving like a wave, spread out across multiple possibilities. This phenomenon might sound strange, but it actually shares a curious similarity with how computer simulations work. In a simulation, the world exists in a kind of virtual state until it's rendered. Just like how a video game world is only fully constructed when you're looking at it, quantum particles might only assume their definite properties when observed, as if the universe itself is rendering the moment you engage with it. This idea is taken further by the wave function collapse. In quantum mechanics, particles exist in a superposition of multiple states, like being in two places at once, until they are observed. At that moment, the wave function collapses and the particle takes on a definite state. It's as if the universe doesn't fully commit to a single reality until we interact with it. This observer effect has baffled scientists for years, but one fascinating interpretation is that it might suggest reality behaves in a way that mirrors a simulation. Think about it. If we were living in a simulated world, the simulation might not need to render every part of the universe all the time. Just as video games don't fully load or render the entire game world at once, only the parts the player can see, perhaps in a simulated reality, only the regions or aspects of the world that are being observed are rendered in full detail. The rest of the universe could be left in a kind of quantum superposition, waiting for someone or something to observe it, triggering the collapse into a specific, observable state. This parallel between quantum mechanics and simulation theory presents an intriguing possibility that our entire universe could be operating like a highly efficient simulation. Instead of rendering every detail of the world continuously, the system may only activate and display the parts that are being directly observed, much like how a video game only updates the portions the player is focused on. So as we look deeper into the strange behaviors of particles at the quantum level, we might be uncovering more clues that suggest our reality operates more like a simulation than we ever imagined. Could the very act of observing the world be the key to unlocking the true nature of our existence? One of the most fundamental constants of our universe is the speed of light. A fixed speed of 299,792 kilometers per second, beyond which nothing can travel. It's a limit that we've accepted as a basic rule of nature. But what if this speed wasn't just a physical law of the universe, but actually a processing limit embedded in the very fabric of our reality? Think of it this way. In any digital system, there's a maximum rate at which data can be transferred. Whether it's a computer's processor or the internet, Every system has a cap on how fast information can move. Now, if our universe is a simulation, the speed of light could function in much the same way. Just as a computer system has a maximum data transfer rate, the speed of light might be the maximum data transfer rate for how quickly information can travel through the simulated environment we perceive as reality. This interpretation offers an interesting analogy. In a video game, the frame rate or processing power limits the speed at which the game world can update. Similarly, the speed of light could be a hard-coded cap to prevent the simulation from being overwhelmed. It allows the system to manage its resources efficiently, ensuring that information can travel just fast enough to maintain the illusion of a coherent, continuous universe. But there's more. This speed limit could also serve a critical role in ensuring consistency and stability across space. If information could move faster than light, it could create paradoxes, events happening before they were observed, or information racing ahead of cause and effect. By limiting the speed of light, the simulation can maintain a logical, causal order, avoiding the breakdown of the laws of physics and preventing any chaotic computational glitches. In addition, the speed of light may be designed to help with rendering efficiency. In video games, rendering is prioritized based on the player's perspective. Only the parts of the world that are in view get rendered in full detail. It's possible that in our simulated reality, the speed of light serves a similar purpose, to allow the simulation to prioritize the rendering of areas that are relevant to us at any given moment, and avoid wasting resources on parts of the world that aren't currently in our direct perception. It's as though the simulation is only updating the parts of the universe that matter most to us. On an even deeper level, the structure of space-time itself might be a kind of program construct, much like a digital image has a resolution. The speed of light could be the upper limit to this resolution, defining the smallest possible unit of space-time. Just as lowering the resolution of a digital image reduces the level of detail, the speed of light could represent the highest granularity at which reality is rendered. Beyond that, the system simply can't process or render events any faster, ensuring that everything unfolds in a manageable, logical way. So if we look at the speed of light not as a natural law, but as a computational constraint, it raises the possibility that our universe is running on a set of program rules designed to keep everything stable, consistent, and efficient. The speed of light may just be the most visible clue that we're living in a highly sophisticated, finely tuned simulation. When we look up at the night sky, it's hard not to wonder, where is everyone? The Fermi paradox is the term used to describe this very question. The apparent contradiction between the high probability of extraterrestrial civilizations existing in our vast universe and the complete lack of evidence or contact with them. Given the countless stars, many with planets in the habitable zone, the likelihood of other intelligent life forms seems enormous. So why haven't we found any? This question has puzzled scientists and philosophers for decades. There are many proposed solutions. Maybe alien civilizations are too far away. Maybe they're using technology we can't detect. Or perhaps they self-destruct before achieving the means for interstellar communication. But what if there's another explanation, one that challenges our entire view of reality? Consider this. What if we're in a simulation? If we accept the possibility that our universe is a carefully crafted simulation, then it stands to reason that the creators of the simulation might have chosen to limit our access to other intelligent civilizations. After all, if we're living in a simulation designed for a particular purpose or experience, the creators might not want us to focus on alien life or space exploration. Instead, they could be guiding our attention elsewhere, to specific events, ideas, or social dynamics that serve the narrative or experience they've designed for us. This idea parallels how video games work. In a video game, the environment is carefully controlled by the game's developers. The game world is vast, but it only renders the parts that the player can see, interact with, or need to focus on at any given moment. The rest of the world, planets, characters, or events that are outside the player's immediate focus, might not be fully rendered at all. This allows the game to save valuable computing resources, ensuring smooth gameplay without unnecessary details. Now, if our universe is a simulation, we could be living in a similar situation. The selective rendering theory suggests that only certain aspects of the universe, those we can observe or that are important to our experience, are rendered in full detail. Alien life forms, advanced civilizations, or other distant parts of the galaxy may exist, but if they are not relevant to our current simulated experience, they might not be rendered at all. Just like a video game focuses its resources on the parts of the world the player is interacting with, our simulated reality may only bring into focus the elements that are necessary for us. In other words, the Fermi paradox could be explained by the idea that the simulation creators simply haven't chosen to reveal extraterrestrial life to us yet, or perhaps they never will, because it's not part of the narrative they're guiding us through. So the next time you look up at the stars and wonder if we're truly alone, remember that the absence of evidence for alien life might not be a mystery of the cosmos, but rather a clue about the nature of our own reality. One of the deepest mysteries in science and philosophy is consciousness, our ability to experience and be aware of the world around us. Despite incredible advances in neuroscience, we still don't have a complete understanding of how subjective experience arises from the physical processes in the brain. We can map brain activity to thoughts, emotions, and perceptions, but the hard problem of consciousness, how and why certain physical processes lead to awareness, remains unsolved. This gap in our understanding has led some to propose that our consciousness may not be as straightforward as we think. What if consciousness is not a purely biological phenomenon? What if it's something that could be artificially generated, even within a simulation? If we are indeed living in a simulated reality, it's possible that consciousness itself is a construct, designed and programmed into the simulation, rather than emerging naturally from the brain's complexity. Think about this. If the creators of the simulation had the ability to construct intelligent minds within the system, they could design conscious experiences that feel real to the inhabitants of the simulation, like you and me. This would explain why we struggle to fully grasp the origins of consciousness. If our minds are part of a programmed reality, then our understanding of consciousness is, in a way, limited by the rules of the simulation. Just as a character in a video game wouldn't be aware of the code behind its actions, we might not be able to comprehend the true nature of our consciousness because we're bound by the constraints of the simulated world. Now, this idea is supported by an interesting argument. The difficulty in pinpointing what consciousness is might stem from the fact that it's an emergent property in a simulated environment. In the same way that artificial intelligence or computer-generated avatars in a game can exhibit behaviors that seem alive, even though they're not biological, consciousness in a simulation could emerge from the interactions of information, data, and programming. It's not something that comes from a single physical process in the brain, but rather a byproduct of the system's complexity, a feature that appears when certain conditions are met, much like how a detailed world comes to life in a video game once the system has enough data and processing power. In essence, our inability to fully define or understand consciousness might not be due to our lack of knowledge about the brain, but rather because consciousness itself could be a simulated experience, an artificial phenomenon, created and sustained by the rules of the simulation we exist in. So, the next time you ponder the nature of your own mind, consider the possibility that consciousness may not be something purely natural or biological at all. It might just be an advanced feature of the simulation, designed to give us the illusion of awareness. And perhaps understanding it is something that lies beyond the limits of the world we've been programmed to perceive. The idea that our reality might not be as it seems, that what we perceive as real could be an illusion, isn't a new concept. In fact, many ancient philosophies have grappled with ideas strikingly similar to the simulation hypothesis, long before we had the technology to even imagine a computer-generated world. Take, for instance, Plato's allegory of the cave. In this ancient tale, Plato describes prisoners who have been chained inside a dark cave their whole lives. They can only see shadows cast on the wall by objects behind them, and they believe those shadows are the entirety of reality. But when one prisoner escapes and sees the outside world, they realize that the shadows were only a distorted reflection of the true reality. This allegory raises questions about how much of our reality is mere illusion, shaped by our limited perceptions, a concept that directly parallels the idea of a simulated world, where what we experience is simply a projection, not the real reality. Similarly, in Buddhism, there's the notion of Maya, the idea that the material world is an illusion, a veil that hides the true nature of existence. Just as a simulation might create a false reality to mask the true one, Buddhist philosophy teaches that the world we experience is only a temporary, impermanent illusion. And in Hinduism, this concept is echoed in the idea that the physical world is not the ultimate truth, but rather a manifestation of a higher, unseen reality. These ancient perspectives resonate with the simulation hypothesis, suggesting that the idea of a constructed reality has existed in human thought for millennia. Fast forward to modern philosophy, and we encounter the famous brain in a vat thought experiment. Imagine that your brain is removed from your body and placed in a vat of nutrients, while a supercomputer feeds it electrical impulses that simulate the sensations and experiences of the outside world. How would you know you weren't just a brain in a vat, living a simulated life? This thought experiment poses the same question that underpins the simulation hypothesis. How can we be sure that our perceptions of reality aren't being artificially created for us? It's a philosophical question that challenges our assumptions about the nature of consciousness and existence, questions that have led many to consider the possibility that we're living in a simulation. In fact, the idea of simulated realities isn't just confined to philosophy and ancient thought. It's become a central theme in modern science fiction. Films like The Matrix and the works of writers like Philip K. Dick have popularized the notion that our world could be a simulation. In The Matrix, humans live unknowingly in a virtual world created by machines, while their real bodies are used as an energy source. This idea taps into our deep-seated fears and fascinations about the nature of reality, freedom, and control. Similarly, Philip K. Dick's novels explore alternate realities and questions of what's truly real, ideas that resonate with the simulation hypothesis and its implications. These historical and cultural parallels suggest that the notion of simulated or illusory realities isn't just a modern invention. It's a concept deeply embedded in human thought and philosophical inquiry. Whether it's ancient myths, philosophical thought experiments, or popular fiction, the idea that our reality could be more than it seems has been a persistent thread throughout human history. And today, as technology advances, we find ourselves confronting these age-old questions with new tools and new possibilities. As we explore the possibility that our reality is a simulation, one of the most intriguing aspects to consider are the glitches that sometimes seem to break the illusion of our everyday experience. From inexplicable phenomena to strange coincidences, some proponents of the simulation hypothesis suggest that these occurrences might be the result of errors or anomalies in the simulation itself. One of the most commonly cited glitches is the phenomenon of déjà vu. We've all experienced that uncanny feeling where you think, "I've been here before, I've done this before." It's as if a moment in time repeats itself, even though logically you know it hasn't. Some simulation theorists suggest that déjà vu could be a flaw in the simulation, where the system momentarily loops or repeats a sequence of events, causing our brains to feel like we've lived through it previously. It's as though the simulation's code has a momentary hiccup, creating the illusion of repetition or error. Then there's the Mandela Effect, a fascinating and mysterious phenomenon where large groups of people remember an event or fact one way, only to discover that historical records show something entirely different. One of the most famous examples is the collective memory of the death of Nelson Mandela in the 1980s. Many people clearly recall news stories and funerals, even though Mandela was alive until 2013. Other examples include misremembered logos, movie quotes, or song lyrics. Some believe that these shared false memories could be signs of reboots or errors in the simulation, like a program restarting or a mistake in the system's data retrieval process. If the simulation is constantly updating or adjusting, It might explain why large groups of people could remember events that never actually happened. While these anomalies may seem like mere coincidences or psychological quirks, they raise interesting questions about the underlying structure of our reality. Could these glitches be evidence that our world, like a computer program, has flaws or bugs, imperfections in the code that occasionally slip through? These occurrences, while speculative, certainly fuel curiosity about whether there's a deeper design to reality and whether we might be able to one day uncover the code that governs our existence. But it's not just small glitches like déjà vu or the Mandela Effect. The sheer complexity of reality also invites the question, how much of what we experience is rendered by the simulation? In a game or virtual world, only certain parts of the environment are processed at any given time, depending on where the player's focus lies. Could there be more to our world? Things we never see or experience, waiting to be revealed, or simply left out of the simulation altogether to conserve resources? These glitches in reality might not just be strange coincidences or quirks of memory. They could, in fact, be windows into the true nature of the simulation, a reminder that our reality might not be as flawless as we think, and that there's still much more to discover about the system running behind the scenes. When we talk about the simulation hypothesis, one of the most compelling aspects isn't just the philosophical or technological implications, but the probability that we are, in fact, living in a simulated reality. One of the most powerful arguments for this idea comes from philosopher Nick Bostrom, who proposed a statistical framework that raises the likelihood of living in a simulation. Bostrom's probability argument suggests that if advanced civilizations have the ability to create highly detailed simulations, realities so realistic that the inhabitants within them can't tell they're simulated, then it's statistically more probable that we are in one of those simulations than in the base reality. The logic behind this is simple. If a civilization can create thousands, millions, or even billions of simulations, and only a few instances of base reality exist, the sheer number of simulated worlds would make it far more likely that we're living in one of them. Think of it this way. It's like the difference between finding a rare marble in a jar full of marbles versus finding that same marble in a jar full of billions of marbles. The more simulations that exist, the more likely it is that we're inside one, rather than in the single original real world. The probability just shifts in favor of the simulations. But there's another concept that bolsters this argument, the anthropic principle. This principle suggests that the conditions we observe in our universe are not random, but are specifically optimized for our existence. We live in a universe that's perfectly tailored for life, especially human life. Yet if you look at the vastness of the cosmos, it seems statistically improbable that these conditions should exist by chance. The anthropic principle argues that we can only observe conditions that allow for our existence, implying that the universe is fine-tuned, perhaps by a designer or simulator, to create the optimal environment for conscious beings like us. If our reality were engineered to allow life to emerge and flourish, it would support the idea that our universe might be a simulation, designed with certain parameters to ensure that life develops and experiences the conditions necessary for survival. In this case, the designer might be a civilization that created our simulated world, tailoring the laws of physics, the constants of nature, and the conditions of life to suit a specific purpose. Then there's the infinite simulation argument. Imagine this. If one civilization creates simulations, those simulated beings might eventually develop their own technology and create simulations of their own. Now you have a hierarchy of simulations within simulations, a process that could repeat endlessly. In this scenario, the number of simulated worlds multiplies exponentially, creating an infinite regression where every world is a simulation of some higher level of reality. In this case, the more layers of simulations there are, the more likely it becomes that we're living in one of the simulated worlds, rather than the base or original reality. The probability continues to increase as the number of simulated worlds grows. So when we consider all these statistical arguments, the sheer number of simulations, the fine-tuning of our universe, and the possibility of infinite layers of simulation, the likelihood that we are living in a simulation becomes more than just a philosophical musing. It becomes a statistical reality that challenges our understanding of what's real and what's illusion. When it comes to the simulation hypothesis, one of the most high-profile proponents of the idea is none other than Elon Musk, the tech entrepreneur and visionary behind companies like SpaceX and Tesla. Musk has publicly stated that he believes there is a 1 in a billion chance that we are not living in a simulation, making him one of the most outspoken advocates of this idea in the tech world. So, what led Musk to arrive at this conclusion? His reasoning is rooted in the rapid pace of technological advancement, specifically in areas like video games, virtual reality, VR, and artificial intelligence, and AI. Musk points to the incredible progress we've seen in the development of immersive simulations. Just think about how far video games have come in recent decades. The graphics, the storytelling, and the interactivity of today's games are almost unrecognizable compared to the early games from a few decades ago. And as technology continues to improve, it's not hard to imagine a future where virtual environments are so realistic, so detailed, and so immersive that they become indistinguishable from reality. Musk argues that if we extrapolate from the current trajectory of technological growth, it seems inevitable that we will eventually reach a point where creating a fully immersive simulation is within our reach. He suggests that in the near future, advancements in VR and AI could allow us to create virtual worlds so lifelike that the people within them wouldn't even be aware they're living in a simulation. This, Musk says, would dramatically increase the likelihood that we are already living in such a simulation. If a future civilization is able to create millions of highly realistic simulations, the statistical probability that we're living in one of them, rather than the base reality, becomes overwhelming. The core of Musk's argument hinges on the idea that simulation technology will eventually advance to the point where simulated realities are indistinguishable from our own. As we develop more sophisticated technology, such as artificial intelligence that can mimic human behavior and virtual reality systems that can perfectly replicate sensory experiences, it becomes clear that creating a highly convincing, simulated world would no longer be a fantasy. It would be an inevitable outcome of technological progress. Musk believes that the rapid acceleration of computing power, similar to Moore's law, which observes the doubling of computing power every 2 years, will make it possible for even advanced civilizations to create these hyper-realistic virtual worlds. Musk's view is that if we reach that point, it's more likely that we are in one of those simulations than in the original base reality. In other words, the more simulations we create, the more probable it becomes that we're living in one of them. His stance on the simulation hypothesis isn't just a fun thought experiment for him. It's a deeply considered perspective that reflects his understanding of the trajectory of human technological development. For him, the possibility of living in a simulation is no longer just an idea to ponder. It's a statistical reality based on how far technology is likely to advance in the coming centuries. So, when one of the world's leading tech entrepreneurs points to the simulation hypothesis as a plausible future scenario, it's a signal that these discussions are moving from the realm of science fiction into the realm of serious scientific speculation. One of the most compelling reasons to take the simulation hypothesis seriously is the exponential growth in computing power that we've witnessed over the last several decades. Central to this growth is Moore's law, a prediction made by Gordon Moore, co-founder of Intel, back in 1965. Moore's law states that computing power, the ability of a computer to process information, doubles approximately every 2 years. What this means is that, as time progresses, our computers are becoming increasingly powerful at an accelerating rate. In practical terms, Moore's law suggests that simulations, especially those designed to be lifelike and highly detailed, will continue to become more complex and realistic as our computing capabilities grow. Just think about the video games and virtual worlds we interact with today. The graphics, the physics engines, and the AI systems are already far more advanced than just a decade ago. As we continue to make breakthroughs in hardware and software, the simulations of tomorrow could become so sophisticated that they might be indistinguishable from reality. But it doesn't stop with conventional computing. Enter quantum computing, which has the potential to revolutionize our computational abilities on a massive scale. Unlike classical computers, which process information in binary, using bits, quantum computers use quantum bits or qubits. These qubits can represent and store data in multiple states simultaneously, allowing for exponentially greater computing power. In theory, quantum computing could enable simulations of such enormous complexity that they might encompass entire universes, with the capability to simulate every molecule, interaction, and event down to the finest detail. If quantum computers can one day become a reality, they could pave the way for mind-boggling advancements in simulation technology. Imagine a simulated world so detailed that it mirrors every aspect of our own universe, from the behavior of particles at the quantum level to the vast interactions of galaxies in space. Alongside advances in quantum computing, artificial intelligence, AI, and machine learning are also developing at an astonishing rate. In recent years, AI has made huge strides in areas like natural language processing, decision-making, and human behavior simulation. Systems like chatbots, virtual assistants, and AI-powered games can already mimic human speech, emotions, and decisions in increasingly convincing ways. As these technologies continue to evolve, AI will be able to create virtual characters and environments that are not only convincing, but also able to react and adapt in real time to the actions of simulated inhabitants, just like real people do in our world. In fact, as AI advances, it's not hard to imagine a future where AI-driven simulations become so intricate that the inhabitants of these worlds can think, feel, and make decisions just like humans in our reality. As simulations grow in complexity, it's entirely possible that a highly advanced civilization could eventually create worlds that are indistinguishable from our own. These worlds would not only feel real to those inside them, but might be virtually impossible to detect as simulations. So, when we look at the rapid progress we're making in computing, quantum technologies, and AI, it's clear that simulations of incredible sophistication are on the horizon. In fact, the creation of these kinds of virtual worlds might not be just a possibility, but an inevitable outcome as our technology continues to grow. Given the rate at which these technologies are advancing, the argument becomes clearer. If we as a species are able to create hyper-realistic simulations in the future, then the probability that we're already living in one of them becomes not just a theoretical consideration, but a plausible reality. One of the most tangible areas where we can see the simulation hypothesis come to life is in virtual reality, VR. Over the past decade, VR has evolved from a niche technology into a mainstream sensation. We now have systems like Oculus and HTC Vive that allow users to step into fully immersive, computer-generated environments that feel astonishingly real. The success of VR proves that we are capable of experiencing simulated worlds that, while not quite as detailed as our physical reality, already offer a glimpse into the potential of future simulations. The magic of VR lies in its ability to trick the brain. When we put on a VR headset, our brain is essentially convinced that the digital environment we're interacting with is real. This isn't just about seeing a new world. It's about suspending disbelief to the point where we can feel emotions, make decisions, and interact with objects as if they were physically present. The brain's susceptibility to sensory manipulation is incredibly strong, and VR is an example of how easy it is for our minds to accept a simulated environment as real. Consider this. When you put on a VR headset, you might find yourself ducking to avoid obstacles, reaching out to grab virtual objects, or even feeling a rush of adrenaline when you're on a virtual roller coaster. These reactions happen because our brain believes the simulation is happening, even though we know it's not. This demonstrates just how easily we can be immersed in a synthetic environment, an experience that is already quite compelling. But this is just the beginning. The future potential of simulation technologies is truly mind-blowing. As technology improves, we could see simulated worlds that not only engage our sense of sight, sound, but also replicate touch, taste, and smell. Imagine a virtual world so advanced that it perfectly mimics the sensations of being in the real world, where you could feel the warmth of the sun, taste your favorite food, or even smell a flower just as you would in the physical universe. As haptic feedback, sensory technology, and brain-computer interfaces improve, it's entirely possible that these virtual worlds will become so precise and realistic that we won't be able to tell them apart from reality. Now let's consider a thought experiment. If we're able to simulate sight, sound, and basic sensory experiences today, just imagine how much more advanced these simulations could become over centuries. Right now, we're still in the early stages of VR development. There's a lot of room for improvement. But over time, we'll likely develop systems that can simulate every aspect of human experience. This could range from the most complex emotions to the tiniest sensations. Everything we associate with being alive could one day be replicated in a virtual world. And as these simulations become more immersive and sophisticated, the line between the real world and the simulated world could blur to the point where it becomes impossible to distinguish the two. If you were born and lived your whole life in such a simulation, how could you ever know that you weren't experiencing true reality? This idea is exactly what simulation theorists propose. If we can simulate a convincing reality in VR today, what's to say that a highly advanced civilization couldn't create a reality far more intricate, immersive, and lifelike than anything we can imagine? The future of VR and simulation technology isn't just about gaming or entertainment. It's about creating alternative realities, worlds that could feel as real as the one we live in. And if that technology continues to evolve, it may one day answer the question, are we already living in one of these perfectly simulated worlds? As we dive deeper into the simulation hypothesis, it's impossible not to consider the future implications this theory has on our understanding of the universe and our place within it. If we are truly living in a simulation, it could fundamentally alter the way we view life, purpose, and the universe itself. Imagine the existential questions that would arise. If everything around us is a simulation, does that mean our thoughts, experiences, and even our sense of self are just part of a program? Would this change our understanding of free will or the value of human life? These are profound questions that would challenge the very foundation of philosophy, religion, and our everyday existence. At the same time, the idea that we might one day create our own simulations adds another layer of complexity. If we reach the point where we can build simulations that are indistinguishable from reality, we'll likely face the same ethical dilemmas and technical challenges that any advanced civilization would. How will we treat simulated beings? Would they have rights? What responsibilities would we have as the creators of these realities? And if simulations are indeed the future, how would the role of consciousness, something we barely understand, play out in these worlds? Looking forward, the question shifts from, are we in a simulation, to what happens next? As technology advances, we might find ourselves not only trying to understand if we're living in a simulation, but also determining how to create simulations ourselves. This could give us insight into the potential challenges faced by any civilization at the pinnacle of technological development. In terms of technology, if we one day master the art of simulation to the point where it mirrors reality, this would mark a massive leap forward, not just for our species, but for all of existence. We may uncover answers to questions like, what is consciousness? Or what is the nature of reality? But this knowledge could also open up new dilemmas. Should we create worlds that mirror our own, or should we focus on creating entirely new kinds of realities? What could be the consequences of those decisions? While the simulation hypothesis offers an intriguing perspective on the nature of reality, there are several counter-arguments and criticisms that challenge its plausibility. Let's take a look at some of the most pressing concerns. First, there's the issue of the complexity of simulation. Critics argue that running a simulation as vast and detailed as our universe could require unimaginable amounts of energy and computational resources. After all, our universe contains billions of galaxies, each filled with countless stars, planets, and particles. To simulate all of this, down to the smallest interactions, would demand an astronomical level of processing power, something even the most advanced civilization might struggle to provide. As technology progresses, we're certainly seeing exponential increases in computational power, but the scale of what would be needed for a true-to-life simulation could be beyond the reach of any civilization, no matter how advanced. Then there's the problem of data storage. Just think about it. To accurately simulate every single particle in the universe, not only would you need an incredible amount of computational power, but you would also need to store vast amounts of data. Data for every interaction, every event, and every moment that occurs. Critics argue that the sheer storage requirements for such a simulation could be exponentially complex, potentially surpassing the limits of any technology, even in a distant future. The question is, would it be feasible for any civilization, no matter how advanced, to handle such a burden? Another significant point of contention is the moral and ethical implications of the simulation hypothesis. If we are in a simulation and the entities within it are conscious, this raises troubling questions about the ethics of suffering. The real-world implications of creating conscious beings who experience pain, death, and hardship are not easy to ignore. Critics argue that it would be deeply problematic, if not immoral, for any advanced civilization to intentionally create a world with suffering, especially if those suffering are aware of their circumstances. If a simulation is capable of generating pain and trauma, would it be ethical for the creators to allow that suffering to occur? These questions bring us to the next critique. Would a civilization really create such a simulation? Could an advanced civilization really go through the effort and the moral sacrifice to create conscious beings that experience the kinds of challenges we face in the real world? It's one thing to create an artificial world for entertainment or research, but creating a universe full of struggle and suffering might be beyond what even the most advanced civilizations would consider. Lastly, there's the issue of testing the simulation hypothesis. While some scientists and philosophers are exploring ways to test the theory, looking for potential signs that we might be living in a simulation, critics argue that the very nature of the hypothesis makes it unfalsifiable. In other words, there's no definitive way to prove or disprove the idea, which means that simulation theory remains speculative at best. Without a way to test the hypothesis through experiments or observations, it becomes more of a philosophical thought experiment than a scientifically testable theory. So, while the idea that we might be living in a simulation is undeniably fascinating, these criticisms highlight just how difficult it might be to truly accept the theory as plausible. The complexity of running such a simulation, the moral considerations of creating conscious suffering, and the challenges in testing the idea make it a highly debatable concept. As we continue to explore these arguments, one thing becomes clear. Simulation theory isn't just a scientific question, but one that touches on profound ethical, philosophical, and technological dilemmas. Whether or not simulation theory is true, its implications are nothing short of fascinating. It forces us to reconsider everything we know about the nature of reality, the power of technology, and the limits of human understanding. Even if we never find out if we live in a simulation, this theory pushes us to ask deeper questions about the fabric of the universe and how far we're willing to go to shape it. So, what do you think? Could we be living in a simulation? Or is this just an intellectual exercise that will eventually fade into the realm of science fiction? Either way, the conversation is far from over. If you enjoyed this deep dive into simulation theory, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to stay tuned for more thought-provoking videos about life's biggest mysteries. Until next time, keep questioning the nature of reality.